At 17:30 on January 27, 2026, inside the Woodland Pulp facility in Baileyville, Maine, a routine mill shutdown was underway. But a hidden anomaly was already propagating through the process sewer, about to unleash a lethal concentration of hydrogen sulfide, a gas known as the Silent Reaper. Casey Malcolm was 20 years old. A chemical engineering student at the University of Maine, she'd taken a co-op internship at Woodland Pulp, a mill that had operated in Baileyville for decades, converting wood into dissolving pulp. On January 27th, she was on site during a facility-wide shutdown triggered by escalating natural gas prices. Alan Hornberger was 26, an engineer. He'd worked at the mill long enough to understand its systems, the digesters, the bleach plant, the miles of process sewers carrying waste slurry beneath the facility. That afternoon, both were in the bleach plant, where chemicals transform raw pulp into marketable product. The shutdown was procedural, expected. Nothing about the day suggested catastrophe. But, beneath their feet, in an enclosed process sewer, sulfuric acid was contacting sulfurous compounds, byproducts of the pulping process. The mixture generates hydrogen sulfide, H2S, a colorless gas, heavier than air. At low concentrations it smells like rotten eggs. At 100 parts per million, it paralyzes the olfactory nerve. You stop smelling it. At 700 parts per million, unconsciousness becomes immediate. The gas has no warning at lethal levels. It displaces oxygen in the bloodstream faster than carbon monoxide. The body shuts down before the brain registers danger. This is the forensic profile of a silent killer. Inside the bleach plant, the atmospheric composition was shifting. H2S was migrating from the sewer system into the workspace through ventilation pathways or structural gaps. No alarms, no sensors triggered. The concentration was building in an environment where Casey Malcolm and Alan Hornberger, along with 9 other workers, were performing routine tasks. The anomaly had propagated, the atmosphere had been compromised, and nobody knew. The first indication was physiological. One individual slumped to the floor without warning, then another. No coughing, no gasping for air, just collapse. The kind of sudden incapacitation that doesn't allow for a verbal alarm or a controlled descent. Workers nearby saw bodies drop and instinctively moved to help. That decision exposed them to the same lethal concentration. H2S disrupts cellular respiration. It binds to cytochrome oxidase in mitochondria, the same mechanism cyanide uses. The body cells can no longer use oxygen, even if oxygen is present. Victims don't suffocate from lack of air. They suffocate because their cells stop processing it. The effect is rapid, disorienting, fatal. Within minutes, multiple workers were down. Some were still conscious, attempting to crawl toward exits. Others were motionless. The bleach plant had become a containment zone for an invisible toxin that spread faster than any emergency response could mobilize. At 18:20, the Baileyville Fire Department received a dispatch. 2 subjects down at the Woodland Pulp facility. By the time Fire Chief Brendan Ireland and his team arrived, the scope had expanded. 11 individuals had been exposed, 9 were injured. 2 were in critical condition. The fire department's hazmat protocols identified hydrogen sulfide as the probable agent. Ventilation systems were activated. The bleach plant was evacuated and sealed. Emergency medical teams transported victims to hospitals in Calais and Machias. But the atmospheric window had already closed. The damage was done. Casey Malcolm was among those rushed to the hospital that evening. So was Alan Hornberger. 8 members of United Steelworkers Local 27 were also exposed, along with 2 electricians. Union representative Mike Higgins later confirmed that all 10 union workers were medically cleared and returned home without hospitalization. Malcolm and Hornberger were not as fortunate. The forensic timeline shows a cascade: routine operations, hidden chemical reaction, atmospheric saturation, mass incapacitation, emergency response. Each phase measured in minutes. The margin between survival and fatality in H2S exposure is not wide. It's a knife edge. By morning, the forensic record indicated 2 distinct fatalities. Casey Malcolm died that evening, January 27th. She was 20 years old. A student pursuing a technical degree, her family learned she'd been killed by a gas she likely never smelled. Alan Hornberger died from his injuries in the days that followed. He was 26. An engineer who understood the systems that ultimately failed him. The remaining 9 victims survived. 2 were in critical condition initially. 1 remained hospitalized into February, though specific medical details were not released to protect privacy. The 8 union workers and 2 electricians returned to their families, but the psychological imprint of watching colleagues collapse, of feeling your own body fail in real time, does not fade quickly. Mike Higgins, the union representative, spoke to the press days later. His tone was measured, but the grief was audible. "We're reeling from this," he said. "When we figure out what the root cause is, we'll do our best to put measures in place so this doesn't happen again." But the root cause was already partially visible in the forensic record. Woodland Pulp had a history. The facility had been cited by the Occupational Safety and Health Administration 6 times since 2022. In September 2022, OSHA issued an $8,628.90 fine for explosive dust concentrations in the mill, a hazard unrelated to H2S but indicative of broader procedural lapses. In August 2024, another citation for disorderly workspace conditions. The violation spanned categories: housekeeping, combustible materials, atmospheric hazards. 6 citations in less than 4 years, none had resulted in fatalities before January 27th. But they established a pattern, a systemic bypass of safety protocols. A culture where procedural corners were cut, where hazards were documented but not mitigated. Casey Malcolm and Alan Hornberger died in a facility that had been warned. Repeatedly, the bleach plant was closed indefinitely following the incident. Woodland Pulp spokesperson Scott Beale stated the company was cooperating fully with investigators. But cooperation after the fact does not reverse the forensic record. 2 lives, 9 injuries, a mill shutdown that revealed not just a gas leak, but a systemic failure. The Chemical Safety and Hazard Investigation Board opened a formal investigation on February 9, 2026. Chairperson Steve Owens issued a statement. "This terrible tragedy is deeply concerning. The CSB's investigation will seek to determine the cause and what can be done to prevent something like this from happening again." The CSB focuses on process safety, the systems, procedures and equipment designed to prevent catastrophic releases. Their investigation into Woodland Pulp would examine the facility's chemical handling protocols, its H2S monitoring systems, and its emergency response procedures. But the forensic record already suggested answers. Hydrogen sulfide is not an exotic hazard in pulp mills. It's a known byproduct of kraft pulping, where wood chips are cooked in sodium hydroxide and sodium sulfide. When sulfuric acid, used in bleaching processes, contacts these sulfurous compounds in enclosed sewers, H2S is generated. The chemistry is predictable. The danger is well documented. Process sewers in modern mills are equipped with ventilation systems and atmospheric sensors. H2S detectors are standard in high-risk zones like bleach plants. Alarms are set to trigger at 10 parts per million, well below the concentration that causes olfactory paralysis. If those systems had been operational, the release on January 27th should have been contained before anyone collapsed. The fact that 11 workers were exposed suggests a systemic bypass. Either the sensors failed, the ventilation was insufficient, or the alarms were disabled or ignored. The CSB's investigation has not yet released specific findings on programmable logic controller faults or the status of valve V402, a component potentially tied to the sewer system's pressure regulation. Those details remain classified pending the final report, but the broader picture is clear. This was not a freak accident. It was a procedural lapse with a forensic trail. OSHA's history with the facility supports this conclusion. A troubling forensic record of 6 OSHA citations. Prior to this incident, explosive dust, disorderly conditions. Each citation represented a moment where the facility's safety culture was tested and found lacking. Each fine was a warning, and on January 27th, the warnings culminated in 2 fatalities. As of May 2026, the investigations by the CSB and OSHA remain open. No final root cause has been released. No criminal charges have been filed. The bleach plant is still closed, though other sections of the Woodland Pulp facility have resumed limited operations. On March 7th, just over 5 weeks after the H2S release, a secondary incident occurred. A drain valve opened unexpectedly, releasing 4,000 gallons of hydrogen peroxide into the facility's sewer system. The peroxide reacted with pulp residue, producing thick smoke. Fire and hazmat teams responded. No injuries. No fire environmental monitoring of the mill's aeration lagoon showed no adverse impact to the St. Croix River. Scott Beale, the company spokesperson, described it as an unrelated operational issue during the mill's restart phase. But the timing raised questions. 2 atmospheric incidents in 6 weeks, a facility with a documented history of safety violations, a pattern of procedural lapses that had not been corrected even after 2 deaths. Mike Higgins and the union are waiting for the CSB's final report. So are the families of Casey Malcolm and Alan Hornberger. So is the broader industrial safety community, which views pulp mill H2S releases as preventable tragedies when proper systems are maintained. The full forensic record, including specific PLC faults or valve V402 details, remains, unreleased. The CSB typically takes 12 to 18 months to complete investigations of this complexity. Until then, the exact sequence of failures that allowed a silent reaper to claim 2 lives is locked in draft reports and witness interviews. But the broader lesson is already visible. Hydrogen sulfide is not an invisible enemy, it's a known hazard with well-established mitigation protocols. Atmospheric monitoring, ventilation, training, alarm systems. When those systems are bypassed, whether through neglect, cost-cutting or procedural drift, the atmosphere becomes weaponized. Casey Malcolm was 20, Alan Hornberger was 26. They went to work on a routine shutdown day and died because the air they breathed had been compromised by a systemic failure. The silent reaper of Maine wasn't the gas. It was the culture that allowed the gas to propagate unchecked. And until the final investigative findings force systemic change, that culture remains the most dangerous atmosphere on Earth. If stories like this keep you up at night, subscribe to Forensic Protocol, because this rabbit hole goes deeper than you think.